What is Sola Scriptura? Sola Scriptura is one of the 5 solas of the Reformation, and despite being one of the rallying cries of the Reformation, it is deeply rooted in history. Translated, it literally means Scripture alone. But what exactly is meant by this phrase, Scripture alone? A good definition of Sola Scriptura, or Scripture alone, is that Scripture is the only infallible and sufficient rule of faith for the church in teaching and in practice. Now, this definition is chosen very carefully, and it's also important here to define what we mean by rule of faith, meaning something that guides or governs what we believe and why. Now, how exactly do we arrive at this conclusion? Well, this conclusion is arrived at by the very nature of Scripture itself as theopneustos, or God-breathed. This makes the nature of Scripture unique. The church possesses nothing else that is God-breathed. Given that Scripture comes from God and is breathed out by God, it becomes supreme in its authority because of the supreme authority of its author, making Scripture unique in its nature and function, making it unparalleled in both. Now, none of this negates tradition or the church fathers or personal experience in worship. All of those have a role for the church today. However, Sola Scriptura does maintain all of these are subordinate to the Word itself. The biblical Word, rather than tradition or personal experience, is the test of truth. Now, why is this so important today? Because the entire extent of our lives ought to be subject to Scripture. The church we go to, our worship experience in the church, and everything we do in our daily practice ought to be subject to Scripture and ever reformed by Scripture alone.